All right, we're ready to go. How's everybody doing out there? The participants are adding up, Mr. Porter. Let's give people a second. The numbers going up fast.
All right.
All right, we'll get started. How's everybody doing out there? It is an absolute pleasure to introduce my man, my friend, Mr. David Porter. As you all know, David is the key songwriter behind many of the great Stax recordings. First and foremost, making up a large majority of the Sam and Dave repertoire. Those songs are just undeniable. Hold On, I'm Coming, I Thank You, Soul Man. Last but not least, When Something Is Wrong with My Baby, my personal favorite. And, David is also still highly active, running the Made in Memphis record label, publishing company, and First Class Studio down in Memphis, which he's going to talk about a little. His songs have been sampled by Wu-Tang, Mariah, Will Smith. He is a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He is on the list of 100 greatest songwriters of all time by Rolling Stone. He is the unofficial mayor of Memphis, with a street named after him. If you've been with him in Memphis, you know what I'm talking about. He just a wonderful creative force in music for a very long time. It's an honor to get to introduce him today. But what's bigger than that is it has been a lifetime honor for me to have been his friend for the last 6 years. I'm so fond of him. He knows that. He's just one of those guys. And we had a recent, a year and a half ago or so before pre-pandemic, he called me in the afternoon in LA. That told me he was in town. It was one of those guys that you stop what you're doing and you go see Mr. Porter and you hang out with him, and then you got to hang with him and match his endurance level. I just can't say enough good things about David, and just honored that he's my friend. And I'm sure you guys will all, see what a dynamic personality he is, and enjoy this next hour. David, I can't thank you enough for doing this for the company. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Wow. Thank you so much. It is just a truly a great honor for me, certainly because it's the opportunity for me to join friends and talk about a little bit about the music industry. You're kind enough to bear with me saying a few things about myself, but the friendship that Mark, we have, and Evan, and we have is so very, very special to me. And the relationship that I've had with Universal has been special as well. I really appreciate the respect that's being shown to me today to afford me the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you guys. So Neil, you and I am ready to go.
Okay, fantastic. And Mark, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Echoing what Mark said, David, I also had the chance to meet you several times in Los Angeles and luckily in Memphis, and I just can't underline enough what Mark said. It's a professional and personal pleasure to get to know you, and you are very much loved within the company. You can't see them. Fans to a person. There are a whole bunch of people out in the Zoomosphere. Oh God, I think I might just made up a new word. Joining us and enthused to listen to the conversation we're going to have. A quick housekeeping note for everybody. At the end of our conversation, if we have some time, I'd like to open it up to some questions. So feel free to drop some questions in the chat function, and we'll see if we can take some towards the end. Okay, David, you are closely connected with Memphis, not closely, as Mark said, the unofficial mayor of Memphis. Is this where you grew up? Did you grow up in Memphis?
Well, yeah, Neil, I did grow up. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. I was actually born on a dead-end street in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was just being a part of the fabric of that soil did so much for me in making me the person that I am. I was born on a street called Virginia Street. And on that street, my next door neighbor was a young man by the name of Carl Cunningham, who ultimately ended up being the drummer for the Barcades. He was in the plane crash with Otis Redding when that happened. On the other side of the street, about 4 doors up the street, on that same street I was born, was a guy by the name of Maurice White. And Maurice and I sang at the church that was at the other end of that same street, called Rose Hill Baptist Church, when we were 8 and 9 years old. So yes, I was born in Memphis without question.
Oh my goodness, right. Well, was the music in your family home? I mean, there's obviously music around you with your friends and the people you just mentioned. Was the music in the family home? Did you grow up with music?
The interesting thing about my growing up, I'm from a family of 12. And so it was difficult to get food in the home, let alone think in terms of how much music we could get in. So no, there was not a lot of music instruments or things of that nature in my home, but there was a passion inside of me from a very, very young age to sing. And so that started out at a very, very, very young age. And so that the spirituality of just wanting to sing and the emotional connectivity that I derived from that started me developing a passion for music. And then, like I said, right up the street, at 9 years old, Maurice and I were singing at Rose Hill Baptist Church in a little bit of what during that time they called quartets. It was 4 of us.
Oh, right. Absolutely,
Yeah.
So was singing the first thing you got into? Did you presumably learn to play an instrument at some point? Was that the next step?
Well, I was passionate about music to the extent that I had a natural gift for coming up with ideas and out of nowhere. And I didn't quite understand that. So when I got the urge to get into trying to learn a little bit about piano, I started that effort, but then I stopped rather quickly because I was more passionate for being center focused, singing on the stage. And I got focused with that. And by the time I got into high school, I thought I wanted to really perfect trumpet play. So I started messing around with that, but I didn't proceed further with that because I was so engrossed in singing and being the artist that stood center stage to sing. I was so inspired by an artist by the name of Clyde McFadden, who had a tone that was similar to what I felt I had. And so that made me think, even at a very, very young age, that I could be a star because Clyde McFadden was one. So I focused on the singing part. And even by the time I was in high school, Maurice had developed some feelings for wanting to play a little bit of drum. He and I were singing. And so he got fascinated with that. I mentioned my next door neighbor, little Carl, was pecking on, not with drum sets, but with sticks on trees and things. And Maurice was doing the same kind of thing on cans and trees and this kind of thing. And so that was our exposure to instruments. It was not a very, very significant one because there was not a very, very much money during those times. Yeah, I'm a kid from the 40s and 50s, so it was, you can only imagine the climate in the South at that time, but also the drive to be able to simply survive. But I was passionate about music through the singing aspect and had aspirations to do something significant that way.
So when did you become interested in songwriting? Was there a moment where you thought, I could give it a go at writing a song here? Or
well, as I mentioned, I was one of those weird kind of situations. I would come up with ideas and thoughts and things from a creative perspective that was deep inside of me and didn't quite understand it, except I knew there was something special going on because I would come up with ideas, create songs in my mind. We walking on the street, you'd think maybe something was wrong with the kid because I'd be making faces and being animated and whatever. I was making up things. So by the time I had my first original song, it was the 6th grade. I sang at Rose Elementary School, a song called "Till the End of My Life." I sang that publicly, and I was 9 years old. So I got into the creative urge as well as the singing part of it because I saw that as an entree into the music. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that there was a gift from someplace, and I was trying to just get as good at it as I possibly can, never thinking that the songwriting aspect would be my path, thinking that the singing was going to be it. And so that was where my passion was, but I was still using those creative instincts to come up with ideas.
Oh, wow. Okay. Obviously, as Mark mentioned in the introduction, he mentioned Sam and Dave. So we're talking about Stax Records, that Memphis legend and institution. How did you get first involved with Stax?
Well, I've always been a young kid that was passionate about music, and passionate to the extent that I felt that my path for a career would be somehow attuned or aligned with music.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a kid in high school that, as some people say, it was a little bit mannish. So I ended up becoming a parent really before I finished high school. And so I knew I was singing around clubs and hanging around clubs rather, wanted to get on the stage to sing and wanted to do that, and figuring that that would be my path, but I had to provide a little bit for a family that I'd started. And so I looked for jobs. So I was working at a grocery store, still singing, as I mentioned, talent shows in high school. Matter of fact, meeting Isaac Hayes, that happened while in high school, singing at talent shows on Beale Street. So singing was an intricate part of that, but also survival was a more important part at that particular time. So I got a job working across the street from this old movie theater called the Capitol Theater. And I was working at a grocery store in produce, potatoes. And so I was working at the grocery store. So I noticed it appeared there were some people moving in to that theater across the street, and it looked like they were bringing in music equipment kind of things. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't become a pest or anything like that. I just waited for an opportunity to go over and see what was going on. That took a little time. And one of those evenings I was working at the store, I went over, and I was told that it was a country and western label that they had started, and they did not do what Jim Stewart looked at me and said, we only do country music. He didn't say anything, but I said, well, would you consider taking a listen to something I do? Well, we only do country music. So I went back to the store and started doing my job on a day-to-day basis. But there was a record store that was connected to that theater. Mm-hmm. And they had opened up that record store selling music in the community. And that community was a transitional one, going from, at one time it was all just a white community there, and then it started transitioning over. So the record store, which was run by Jim Stewart's sister, was now beginning to sell music to that community, and she was selling a lot of R&B music, which was then taking off with That's Domino, the New Orleans, all those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And I went over there one evening and just introduced myself to her, and found that she had sensibilities to music in a very, very strong way. And I just asked her if she maybe could convince her husband to take a listen to me. And she, with me going over a few times, she became a little bit attached to me, and she worked on Jim to take a listen. He was still doing country. A guy there at that studio at the time, a fellow who was working with him on the country, was a guy by the name of Chips Moman. If you guys would Google who Chips Moman was, you'd realize he became an extremely successful producer, a guy in his own right, even produced Elvis, Neil Diamond, and so many others. But Chips was a guy who was working with Jim. And so Estelle convinced Jim to do an audition with me. Chips and I wrote a couple of songs together. They were awful because I froze. You finally get an opportunity. This is what I'll say to these young aspiring writers. Be sure you're ready for an opportunity, but first be sure that you believe in yourself enough to be confident when the opportunity presents itself. Because I was not as confident as I needed to be. So when I had the opportunity, I froze. So I couldn't come up with a quality song. So I rewrote words to a song called Old Gray Mare. And they allowed me to do the demo. And so they didn't know the musicians to call on or anything like that. And so I got some musicians. I got Andrew Love to play saxophone on it, who later became the anchor of the Memphis Horns.
Mhm.
I got William Bell to sing background for me, who later became a recording artist in his own right. I got Booker T. Jones to play baritone horn, who later became Booker T. at Booker T and the MGs. So unbeknownst to me, I was bringing a creative pool into the studio that made a transition into the kind of music that ultimately gave me an opportunity to get in. And because I couldn't get in as the artist because I'd frozen, I'd asked Jim Stewart if he would give me an opportunity to be a writer for him. And because I was so forward and was bringing talented folk inside of the place, they gave me a 6-month trial. And the rest is history. I can talk about that a little bit deeper later.
Absolutely. So this would be what we now know as the Stax Studio on Macklemore, correct, in Memphis? We're talking about
That would be 926 East Macklemore. Satellite Records then became Stax Records, and we started doing some soulful music, I'd like to say.
Oh, didn't you just? Gosh. So how did you then, you'd met Isaac at this point. How did Isaac end up at Stax? Did you bring Isaac into Stax, or did he walk in through the door?
Yeah, I was the first staff writer at Stax Records. And so, yes, I brought Isaac in. I knew Isaac from high school. Isaac sang at Manassas High School in Memphis, and I was at Booker T. Washington High School.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a lot of talent pool out of Booker T. Washington. And I didn't know very much about Manassas High School, but I did know that on Wednesday nights on Beale Street, which was a popular, renowned tourist street in Memphis now, Isaac and I would compete at the Palace Theater with our little vocal groups. He had a group called the Teen Tones, and I had a group called the Marquettes, and you'd compete on Wednesday nights for $3 first prize. And so that's how I met Isaac Hayes, competing for $3 first prize, whoever would win the talent show on Wednesdays. And so I knew who he was. And then after high school, he was, gigging, playing around town, as was I. I was known as Little David, singing around the clubs while I'm still trying to get into a more firm position in music. And he was playing around Memphis in different bands. And so I knew who he was and looking for someone to collaborate on a serious level with, because I was so motivated by what Motown was doing. Holland Ocean Holland was the signal to me that I needed to have someone I could collaborate with that could be as successful as that. And so I approached Isaac, who felt the same kind of passion for being in the music business as I did, even though he sang as well. But he and I both viewed that our opportunity to do something significant gave itself to us from music. And we didn't know at the time, but we know about the example that Motown had with the Holland Ocean Holland situation, and also Burt Bacharach and Hal Baby. We just talked about duos and collaborations seem to work, so why don't we try that? And that was the beginning of it.
So when did you get a sense that you and Isaac were actually onto something rather than trying it out? So it's like, oh, we really have something here. This might be.
Well, as I mentioned, when you listen to what Motown was doing at that particular time, they were owning the marketplace, and we couldn't out Motown. So what we had to do was try to create what we feel was an aura, an image, or creative direction for ourselves. So we worked hard to come up with something that would separate us to the extent that it could be pleasing to listen to in the marketplace. So we did a lot of talking about what that could be, because we used, as I mentioned a moment ago, the examples of what Bacharach David was doing, what Motown and Holland Ocean Holland was doing. So we found that our opportunity lend itself to the spirituality of the church environment, that sanctified kind of feeling, that also the meat of message kind of thing. So we started working to refine that. And so even before Sam and Dave, we had some songs that we felt were going to give us a direction for what we needed to do as a art creative direction that could be potentially meaningful for us. We did not know how meaningful until we had the opportunity to do the initial records on Sam and Dave. The first record that was done on Sam and Dave, this was before Isaac and I got really entrenched with them, was a song called A Place Nobody Could Find. And if you guys check that out, you'll see that was written 100% by me and produced by me. And during that time, James was not putting producer credits on the records, but that was what that was. And the flip side was a song called Good Night Baby, which Steve Cropper and I wrote. So, but it was at that point that we were trying to sell the concept that we needed to have the opportunity to produce someone ourselves. and even though we had done it with no major success, but we felt that we could. And so we got the opportunity to do Sam and Dave. And then that was when Isaac and I really felt, let's go with the church vibe that we felt. So we recorded a song called You Don't Know Like I Know, which really came from an old church song, because you don't know like I know what the Lord has done for me. So You Don't Know Like I Know was motivated out of the spirituality vibe that we felt the church could give to us. And out of that came a sense of yeah, this is the direction that we know we can go into, never losing the thought of emotional connectivity that came from the message and the meat and the emotional music presentation of the church.
So that would be your first significant hit, right? I assume.
That was. You Don't Know Like I Know was the first significant. We had a couple of chart records, but You Don't Know Like I Know was the beginning. And it really cemented in our minds a sense of direction that personalized our creative instincts.
Right. So at that point, did Stax have you concentrate working with Sam and Dave? Because that's the association that I have in my mind. You know, like you think of recording artists as often a songwriting team or whatever that you associate very closely with them. So is that the point that Stax had you focus on Sam and Dave to feed them more and more great songs?
Well, really, when we were given the opportunity, because Jerry Wexler, who had Atlantic Records had Sam and Dave as their artists, and they were trying to find a combination that could work for them, and we were trying to find a way to make a compelling case that we need to be producing more acts independently of anyone else at Stax Records. So with that in mind, what Isaac and I were able to do when we were given the opportunity to work with Sam and Dave was to construct the creative instincts for the creative direction that we wanted to go in off of Sam and Dave. So we were able to do that when we would record the songs. When we would teach them the songs, go through the steps of what those things were, so that we could perfect the concept that we had in mind to be sure that it worked. And so they would be on one side of the mic, I would be on the other side of the mic, and would in essence be directing them like a choir. And Isaac and I would teach them the song, and we would do the music around the creative direction that we felt. And then when that worked, we knew we worked in a creative sense of a creative instinct that could be significant for us. And so we stayed in the lane that gave us that sense of direction. So to your question, yes, that was the thrust that gave the Hayes and Porter the creative instincts for all the other artists that we produced as well.
So Memphis, it was a segregated city at that time, as the South was. But Stax was a multicultural oasis, right? I think I'm fair in saying that. In the civil rights era in the South, that's probably a really groundbreaking, revolutionary prospect. And very much the small label that could. I mean, the label went from local to regional to national to international in quite a fast clip, right? I'd love to get some kind of sense of what it was like to be at Stax at that time. I mean, in that atmosphere when everybody's just feeding off each other.
You know, the interesting thing about the world, when people can get back past their ignorance, and I use that word on purpose, you can find that there's beauty in everyone if you allow yourself to get past the stupidity of these thoughts that there's some other reason that you should evaluate someone. And so in the Stax environment, this is the perfect example of what that really means. When I became the first staff there, then then Jim opened the situation up to other folk. He brought some people that he was close to. Steve Cropper was one of those persons that came into the mix. Steve came with a very, very positive attitude, the right kind of spirit, a willingness to build. And then everyone else who came in through him, who looked like him, were told that was the spirit to come in. Everyone that looked like me or Isaac or Al Jackson, they came in with that spirit. So the opportunity that presented for that particular time was an opportunity unlike anything that was going on outside on the street. There was a segregated environment with racist attitudes based totally around race. And that mentality was outside of the doors of Stax. When we would come in that room to record, there was synergy and an energy between each of us based on the experience that we had had through whatever music path that we had used to develop, whatever creative instincts that we developed, we're given the opportunity to merge with the other in such a way that the uniqueness of it became prevalent because the spirituality of the creative process was grounded in the musicality of Black music. Steve, Duck, anybody, Wayne Jackson, all came with the spirit. How can we perfect that spirit? How can we learn how to feel that spirit? And our willingness to give that kind of energy out was manifested in everything that happened. Al Jackson Jr. was the person that I'd like to give. He was a drummer that I'd like to give as being the catalyst for being sure that the spirit and the feel of the music was grounded in something that had emotional connectivity all around it. So any beat that Al came up with was an easier kind of access to put the kind of emotional connectivity from all of us in such a way that it merged the kind of energy that there was no definition of color. It was just a definition of how strong the music was. And if it was strong enough, it was good enough, it would be impactful enough in the streets. And that's what was beginning to happen. That kind of spirit was inside of the Stax environment. When you look at Booker T and the MGs, and you hear the funk, as we call it, of the records that Booker T and the MGs recorded, and then you look at who the act was, it was 2 white guys and 2 Black guys. And all of that funk came out of that. And when you look at what we were doing at Stax and how we were doing it, it was how good you could play, how good you could write. That was the catalyst for what afforded you the opportunity to be a part of what we were doing. And that was the beauty of it, because the beauty of it came in a connectable way all over the world because of the power of the music.
And so it should be. So it should be. Look, when I came to these songs, that's probably what I reacted to without even realizing it. On a subconscious level, you just feel it, right? I mean, it's just,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I mean, you were writing songs at such a furious pace. I was looking up the last couple of days, you know, the hits you were having in that kind of 66, 67 period. The hits were just pouring out of you and Isaac. Did the kind of hothouse atmosphere, the hothouse creative atmosphere of Stax spur you to songwrite? You know, you're feeding off each other, not just you and Isaac, but the people around you, everybody else.
We were so fortunate to be comfortable that we had I don't know if it's a connectivity to the world of music at that particular time, that we felt that we were giving them what they wanted, and we felt that they were giving us the kind of energy that we needed in order to create more effectively to what they wanted. And that's one of the things that I think has to be learned by those who have aspirations to do music at whatever time. It's not about what you feel, it's about what you make them feel. And so when we found out that they were feeling what we were doing, then we had to go deeper inside of us to refine those qualities that are inside of us that would give us the greater opportunity to do that. And so that was really the catalyst of our creative instincts. And I've lost a little bit of the core of your question, but that was the catalyst of where we were creating from, was being sure that the connectivity was received by what the people were looking for us, and us having the abilities to do it based on what we were feeling they wanted from us. To that extent, example of that, there was a song that we wrote just in fun, but to the point that we were coming out with so many great records. There was a song that we wrote called Comment. And just playing off of it was that. And we wrote a song just off of that, and we recorded it, and it was a top 30 or 40 hit record on the national charts. It was re-recorded out of a couple of groups out of Europe that became hit records for them. Billy Joel recorded the song himself as his initial single, "You Got Me Humming." It was that kind of comfortableness, for inventing a word, that gave us the energy, and every time we would sit down to write a song, that we wanted to be sure that it was coming from the heart, but from the heart that could resonate in a meaningful way with the audiences that were out there appreciating what we were doing.
Oh, absolutely. You broke up, I think, a little, at least for me, a little bit there, David. You Got Me Humming. That was the song you were talking about. Is that correct?
Yeah, You Got Me Humming was an example of us creating something based on our being comfortable for the times that we were living in, and the fact that we were connecting in a global way with the material that we were recording. And so Isaac and I were just having fun with an idea. And we just hummed a melody. And we wrote a song off of that called You Got Me Humming. It was a top 30 or 40 chart record on Sam and Dave. It was later recorded by a group out of Europe. I think it was Cold Blood or some group out of Europe. They had a
Cold Blood.
national chart
Yes.
record. And then Billy Joel recorded it twice in his initial recordings. So it was just one of those kinds of things where we were working hard to be sure that we were aligning ourselves in an emotional way to the public, but we also was coming out of the spirituality of the core of the soulfulness of the church inside of our ideas. And we also were being sure that the meat of the messages were down to the earth kind of way, rather than flowery kind of a presentation of storylines. And so we incorporate those two concepts in what we were doing that I think separated us a little bit from where Motown was, and Motown still had the market topping, and we had our little chunk of it as well.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a different sound, isn't there? Motown has a different soul sound to the sound of Stax, for sure. I mean, that's one of the appeals.
They were amazing. They were amazing. Yeah.
So, you know, we talked about international. Actually, I'd like to just touch on the legendary Stax Volt European Tour of 1967. We've got some of our colleagues from Europe joining us, so I think they probably find it very fascinating. In the spring of 1967, at a time when artists from the United States didn't typically tour in outside of the United States, you went on a tour, a package tour, so 4 or 5 artists, correct? I think.
Yes.
Played some dates in Europe. I've read that crowds gathered at Heathrow to welcome you. You were treated as stars. Staxmania essentially had arrived.
Amazing. Yeah.
Had you any idea you were going to receive that kind of reception when you got there?
None whatsoever. It was the most amazing reception. And just no idea. When we get there, the respect and the knowledge about who we were and how we came up and all those kinds of things was extremely shocking for us. And it's in every country that we went in, it was like that. The performances of Otis and Sam and Dave and Eddie Floyd and Booker T and the MGs, that was amazing. Isaac and I went over as writer producers, not as artists or anything of that nature. So we had the opportunity to just see it all. And it was tremendously impactful on all of us based on the level of respect and appreciation for the music that we had created. And we had no idea it was to that extent. As a matter of fact, when we were in Paris, we had a track that we had to finish on Sam and Dave that we wanted to get completed. And we recorded the track, the vocal of that in Paris, France. And that song was I Thank You. You Didn't Have to Love Me Like You Did, was the vocal recording of that was done in Paris, France. I think of Bridget Bardot, the model. I think someone of that ilk had been in the studio the studio that we went in the day before. But we recorded the vocal of I Thank You over there in that part of the world.
Oh, my goodness, I had no idea.
But it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. The reception in every venue was just unbelievable to us. And we came back to Memphis changed for the rest of our lives, realizing that in a true way that the music was impactful.
Yeah, did you feel that changed you? Did it change your attitude to songwriting, that experience, or were you just more confirmed that you were on? This is great. It's now really a worldwide thing here.
It did. It changed all of us. We got even more committed to being sure that the quality of what we were doing stayed elevated to that level. We really did, because we realized that it was stretching all over the world. You can hear that's happening, but when you actually get the opportunity to experience it, it changes you in a real significant way, and it did.
Oh yeah. Well, I mentioned it just before. When I came to your songs, obviously you're seeing them you're not seeing them from the start, you know, in each new song coming out. You know, you come into them after the fact, right? So you don't get that sense of this thing building. You know, it's just like, wow, here's all these great songs, right? So it's fascinating to hear how you're going through this growth yourselves and the company as well at the same time, right? I'd like to talk a little bit about songwriting, if get into songwriting a little bit, if that's okay. What would you say your songwriting process is? Do you come to a session with an idea, or do you let the session kind of just, you know, take it where it goes, you know, and feed off people, or?
Well, I call it controlled emotion, because when you're doing it as a career and you realize that there are no new emotions, you have to come up with fresh ways to speak to common emotions. Mm-hmm. And so you got to think in a creative sense how you can do that to have something that's significant the next time you do something. I mean, how many different ways can you say I love you? You've got to find fresh ways to do that. How many different ways can you say, well, I'm going to leave you? You got to find fresh ways to do it. So there it is controlled emotion. It is thinking in terms of how can I take the emotion that I want to have emanating from this idea, make it interesting enough and compelling enough where the listener does not realize that they just got to listen to a song that was talking about I love you, because your I love you separates their thought process to the extent that they feel a sense of uniqueness that causes them to gravitate to it. And so it's calculated in that sense if you want to have a career doing this. And so when the writing process was grounded in that controlled emotion, how can I do something that's fresh and significant from a melodic sense, from a sonic sense, from a sound sense, from a rhythmic sense, that gives it a kind of individuality that separates itself in the listener's mind, that they appreciate it in for its own uniqueness to the extent that they're drawn to it in a significant way. So we would think in terms in music of ways to do that with the greatest potential for that kind of impact. And if you're thinking that way, it helps you to write better songs because you're not settling, because it's so easy to sell with I love you. It's so easy to sell we're not going to see each other. But when you realize that there are no new emotions and you got to find a fresh way to do that, it drives you to look for ways to do that. And it drives on every level of the creative process to do that, because music is a language as well. So you have to make it communicate. The melody is a language just with the melodic essence of it. You have to make it resonate in a more impactful way, in a unique way to the listener's ear that draws them to it in a compelling way. And so that's really the steps that Isaac and I use into the creative process. And I've tried to take that kind of information inside of a nonprofit program that I started called the Consortium MMT. And that program deals with passing that kind of information creatively onto the next generation of creatives. And that process, in talking to Stevie and Maurice and people that I've been close to all of these years, we talk about processes, and it all relates to the same kind of, we may call it something different in our way of approaching what we do, but it all locks up to a way that gives the emotional connectivity, that personalizes the idea, that gives it a chance to resonate in a meaningful way in the marketplace.
Right. And that consortium, that's based in Memphis, right? Am I right?
It is based in Memphis. It's the Consortium MMT. And I have 130 plus videos, Neil, of some of the greatest artists in the business talking about their creative steps and their creative process. Jimmy Jam talking about producers, just the list. Valerie Simpson talking about songwriting. Ray Parker Jr. talking about how he created Ghostbusters. Stevie Wonder talking about his creative steps and his steps of creating. And we all created with the same kind of mindset of there are no new emotions. You have to find fresh ways to speak to common emotions, and that's where your opportunities are. But that also gives you an opportunity to find your own uniqueness.
And Memphis is obviously a city full of talent, right? So I'm assuming that you're working to kind of foster that talent. That's part of the
very exciting
project, right?
There's so much talent all over, and talents from the region anywhere can come. But yeah, it's very, very, very much so.
Well, it's a crossroads city, isn't it? Isn't that often where you find these kind of like the fertile ground for talent, is these crossroads
It's across.
places, right?
Yeah. When
How
you can
long?
get Al Green and Otis Redding in the same city, right up the street from each other, recording with their own individual ways, it says there must be something going on there, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Your songwriting process. Let's circle back to songwriting just very briefly. Do you work on a song for an extended time, or is it, is it something that comes quite quickly to you?
That's a good question. And I don't know how to express this other than to say I feel that I'm tremendously blessed, because the naturalness of the creative process for me comes from someplace else, and I can't really take credit for it. I can feel something, hear something, or someone talking about something, and be motivated for a creative slant that gives me a way to present an idea, and I don't know where it comes from. When something is wrong with my baby that Mark mentioned earlier in the introduction, I was asleep, dreaming, woke up. I used to sleep with a pad up under my bed. I woke up and wrote down that title, When Something Is Wrong with My Baby, Something Is Wrong with Me. Went back to sleep, got up that day, called Isaac and said, I have a hit. He said, what it is? I said, When Something Is Wrong with My Baby. We got together, and in about 20 minutes, wrote the song.
Wow.
He just started playing, and I started singing. The whole song came out. And it was like that. We talked about years ago, when Hold On, I'm Coming came about. This is, okay, you guys, don't laugh at me with this joke, but it's the truth. Stack Studios was an old movie theater, and there was a restroom in the back of the room, which we periodically would use as an echo chamber. I was in that restroom one night. Isaac and I was trying to come up with a follow-up to You Don't Know Like I Know. And I was in the restroom, and we would work in the studio late at night. Isaac was rushing me to come out of the restroom, and I screamed to him, hold on, I'm coming. Walked out of the room, says, hey man, I got a title. He said, what it is? I said, hold on, I'm coming. We sit down at the piano, we talked about the concept of Superman and the rescue concept. We talked about that, and Isaac said, hey man, I put a horn riff down a couple weeks ago, because we talked about the rescue thought. And so we went in the control room, played the horn riff, da-da-da-da-da-da. We just played that. Came back, sat at the piano. 25 minutes later, Hold On, I'm Coming was written. It just all came poured out. I heard the melody. We started singing the song. The lyrics came out. I wrote the lyrics right out. Bam. So that's coming from someplace else. Now, that's not to say every single song happened that way, but many of them, more than others, happen that way. When we would think in terms of a calculated approach to the creative process, I did that on the album that I recorded a solo, which was an album called Victim of the Joke. I think you mentioned it. I recorded that myself. Well, I thought calculatingly about each and every song. And so I would take a little bit longer to write those. But inside of the creative process of each of those were the same instincts that I used when Isaac would sit down and we would write some rapidly. So, but as a norm, it would come, many of the songs that Isaac and I wrote would come rather quickly. Chef, I didn't co-write Chef with Isaac, but that was one of those things that Isaac talks about that came rather quickly for him. The guitar player was playing a riff, and he said, let's keep playing the riff, don't stop. He had been playing the riff for the entire song, and he wrote everything else around it. All the chord progressions and movements were written around it. So it's just those kinds of things that come from some other place when you are working in a passionate, committed way, emotionally, to the creative process. You have to let those energies that do come to you that way come to you, and then you have to trust them, but also respect the process that drives you to creating it for the uniqueness that you must find in it, even when it comes to you that way. And so that's a part of what I use and have used in all of these years in my creative thoughts.
Amazing, yes, amazing. As I thought, I don't write songs, and shamefully I don't play music. So the whole thing is a mystery to me, but there you go. It's confirmed that it is this just it's there, right? It's in the ether, and you feel it, and you bring it to us. It's amazing.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about what you're doing now, some of your projects. Made in Memphis Entertainment, I believe you're involved with that. That's would you like to talk a little bit about that? The
I would
studios you
love
have.
to, Bill. I'm so excited that I was fortunate enough to meet a young man who came to Memphis. He was a lawyer. His name is Tony Alexander. He was an entrepreneur. He started many business startups. He was that kind of mindset. He volunteered for my nonprofit, the Consortium MMT, as a board member, and that's how I met him. And one of the most astute attorneys with one of the biggest law firms, and was giving of his time freely to what I was doing in that regard. And I just had this tremendous respect for him. So when I got the urge and desire to go forward with the record label, I approached him, and I said, "Would you go with me on formulating a record company?" And he said, "Well, I'm with a big law firm. You really, probably couldn't afford me." I said, "Well, couldn't afford not to." So it was out of being fortunate enough to get this brilliant young mind, who is the president of the company. I'm CEO, and he's a president, to start this company. And we had a tremendous board of some brilliant minds that were working with us, some partners that were significant players in all of the world. And so we formed this company. And since forming the company, we have a distribution company called Beatroot Music. We distribute new artists from all over the world. We have a publishing company that is significant, not only with my old catalog After Stacks, but new catalog of writers and producers that we have. We have a sync business called Heavy Hitters Music, by the way, that's in the Los Angeles area in Glendale. We have that business that deals with sync music. So it is a company that I'm very, very excited about, very much excited about passing the energy of what that is along to the next generation. So much so until we just purchased a recording studio in Atlanta, Georgia. It's called 4U, the number 4U Recording. That's in Atlanta. We just opened that up a couple of weeks ago. And we have a recording complex in Memphis with a 16,000 square feet recording studio in Memphis that we're very excited about. So it's been an amazing ride for me. And wanting to give something back is also a significant part of me. But also having wonderful friends like I have with you guys makes me know that I'm not the only one doing that. Guys are doing it all over the world. And I think we all realize that we must do that in order to pass it on, because this business has been so great for us and to us.
Well, it's a great testament to you, David, that you're still completely creative, still completely invested in the art of music. It's fantastic. So lovely to hear that. Let me take a couple of questions, actually, because we are it's flown by. We are coming to the close of this session. Question here. Who's your musical influence? Who did you look up to when you were younger? You mentioned Clyde McPhatter, who was the Drifters, right? Was he the lead singer of the Drifters? Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah. There was so much individuality of music. There was so much of that.
David, you turned the camera off. I don't know if you could just. No worries if you can't. Just we can hear you. So
1 second. I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go. Hello again.
Okay. What was that about?
Technology, right?
There was so much individuality going on during my time. There were so many people to look up to that it was just a no-brainer. You can start with the power of what Ray Charles represented. You can also look at what was going on, individuality, what was going on out of New Orleans with the Fats Dominoes and the Lee Georges and those Alan Toussaint, the writing of what those guys were doing, what Alan was doing out of the New Orleans area. And then you look at Jackie Wilson. All of the artists that I was drawn to, they had an individuality about them that separated them in a uniqueness that made you know who they were and wanted to stay engaged with them long term, which taught me that that was a path that was necessary in order to have a career in the music industry. So those were some of those that gave that inkling to me.
Right. We've got about 5 minutes left. You know, I think this might be the perfect question to end on here. Is there any stories about Soul Man? You writing the song, or you talked about Hold On, I'm Coming. So is there a similar interesting story about Soul Man?
Well, yes. Isaac came up with the title Soul Man, and he got that line, the title Soul Man, out of somewhere in Detroit. He's talked about before that was some things were going on in the community. There was a lot of unrest, as you know, in America during those times. And so he got the motivation for it, and he brought the subject to me and said, "Look, man, let's write something around this." You know, and so it was a thought of writing something that was motivational, that was inspirational. Now, the odd thing about Soul Man, it's not odd, but the interesting thing about Soul Man was that when we wrote the song, when we created the concept of the song, we were trying to come up with something that was motivational for people that look like us, Black folks. We were trying to be sure that we came up with some kind of message that would be a stimulator in a real motivational way for young folk to want to get an education, to don't look bad down on yourself if you come from humble beginnings. Be confident. So when we talk about the first line of the song, coming to you from a dirt road, it's just coming from an humble beginning. Inside of the song, we talked about getting an education. In the song, we talked about I was educated at Woodstock. Well, Woodstock was a school in the rural county of Shelby County in Memphis. It was not the festival where a lot of people think about when Belushi and Aykroyd recorded the song, because that festival was created years after the song was released. And so, but we talked in ways inside of the message of Soul Man that was motivation, but it could be motivational, and it ended up being motivation for in everyone. It talks about regardless of whatever situation you're in, you're soulful to the extent that there's so much special inside of you. Go for it, you know. And it just speaks to that. But the motivation for it came out of some of the unrest that Isaac was talking about out of Detroit.
Wow. And am I right in thinking that you are the proud owner of the original or a original Stax sign? Is that correct?
Well, it is one of the signs that was used for a second location that we had on a street called Union Extended. And that was one of the signs that were outside there, and it's a metal sign. So if you come to Made in Memphis Entertainment and you go to our Studio C, going into that room, you'll see the sign on the wall there. It's metal, and it's the logo, the finger stamp logo for that sign. Yes, it's a special. I had no idea I'd have a studio or I have a use for in a public way for that sign. I just bought it and just kept it with me, and that ended up being something very, very special.
Well, it's wonderful to be connected both to your past, the present, and think about your future, isn't it? I mean, it's all encapsulated there. But do you have a favorite sample of your song? I mean, your songs have been sampled in a number of songs. Is there anything?
Yeah, that's a great question. I you know, they're all favorites, being honest with you. When Jay-Z did the Blueprint album and sample, it's just, I think when I look back on what Mariah did with Dream Lover, and to know that the foundation of Dream Lover is a song that written and the feel of it, that's so very, very special. When Will Smith on Getting Jiggy with It when people hear it, na, they don't know that that's some kids that I got off the street at college in Macklemore in Memphis, Tennessee, years and years ago.
Wow.
Those are those kids singing that chant. They don't know that, but so there's several. Wu-Tang Clan is some of my favorite guys on the planet. They are extremely special. Biggie, Who Shot You? That sample is. If I start naming them all, it'll be a long list. LL Cool J, Drake. It's just the list is so long. But starting with the impact that Mariah did on Dream Lover was something very, very special.
Again, it speaks to the power of your catalog, not only just the hits, but the deep cuts, right? There's
Yeah.
lots to discover there.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're near enough coming up to the close. I just would like to mention to everybody, it seems like a good moment. If you would like to explore some more of David's music, I've curated some playlists, which you can find on UMPG Songs. If you'd like to reach out to me personally, I would be more than happy to share those playlists with you and share my deep love and enthusiasm for this music.
And Neil, if I could say one thing.
Of course you can.
Okay, I just have to say that one, it's a truly an honor for me to have been given the opportunity to just share this time with you. A great honor for my dear friend, Marc Cimino, to just introduce me. That's such a thrill for me. And then my dear friend, Evan Lambert, who's like brother to me, to be a part of this great organization. I feel so honored that you guys have endured me for this period of time. And thank you so very, very much for this respect and honor that you've given to me. Thank you so much.
Look, David, the privilege, honestly, it is all ours. It really is. I would say to everybody, if you haven't been to Memphis, when we can all safely travel again, go there immediately. Memphis is arguably the American music city. Yeah, it's just a wonderful place, absolutely wonderful place. And to you, David, we are your publishing family. Likewise, thank you so much for letting us into your home, spending some time with us. These wonderful stories and insights. There's a tip buried in what we talked about. Always have a pad of paper and a pen next to your bed when that moment strikes, right?
Right, that's right.
And this has been a decided honor and a privilege. Everybody, the great David Porter.
Neil, thank you so very much. You were just amazing.
Thunderous applause you're hearing, by the way, now, David. Well, you're feeling it.
Wow.
Now. That's where you're going. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, David.
Bye now.
Bye.